Hello, welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. In the club today, is your media company investment ready? Mark Browning from Zinc Media Group tells us what you need to do to grow your business. Also on the programme, as the BBC publishes its annual plan, things get spicy as Auntie takes on the streamers. Media writer Manori Ravindran picks apart the commentary. All that, plus has Michael Sheen got some explaining to do? One indie thinks so. And in the quiz, we open up the media transfer window. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So welcome back to the Media Club. Before we get into the big stories of the week, let's chat to our guests and find out who they've been picking to join our illustrious ranks. Mark Browning, welcome. First time on the show. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
In a previous life, you were in radio, at heart, then ITN. So now very much in the TV and content world. So who are you picking this week to join our ranks?
Well, I'm going to go with Anne Mensah from Netflix, for those that don't know. Anne is the UK Vice President of Content with a particular brief over what we call in television scripted television, so drama particularly. Because the drama that has been shaping the national conversation, I'm sure we might come on to it, adolescence for the last week, 10 days or so, has come from Netflix. And when you get these ones, I mean, ITV had one, didn't they, last year with Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. When these kind of bits of television come along and change the national conversation, you look for who were behind the decisions. And of course, in this case, I'm sure Success probably had 1,000 mothers, whereas if it had been a disaster, it would have been an orphan. But Anne is part of that team, and so she should be in the club, I think.
And the adolescence sort of bandwagon rolls on. Talked about a little bit on the show before, and I guess this week we had the Prime Minister saying that Netflix, with his endorsement, are making it available to all secondary schools.
Yes, and I think he described it as a documentary, which made me go, "Oh no, this is going to go terribly wrong." If he thinks it's a documentary, it's a drama. So, if we want to use drama as part of a conversation in our schools, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, quite interesting. They're doing it through Into Film, which is a really good charity organisation that talks about screens in schools. And yeah, it needs to exist for things like this to work. So hopefully that'll be something that we continue to be supported so it can do things like this.
Very good.
Manori, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
From your perch as a TV writer, who are you adding to the club this week?
Well, this week I thought actually I would add Emma Butt, who is, full disclosure, a friend, but also an amazing post-production professional. She won a Women in Film and TV award a couple of years ago for her work campaigning for diversity in post-production. She's just come out. She did a great groundbreaking report for the Lenny Henry Center on post-production diversity in 2020. She's done a follow-up that came out yesterday and effectively shows very little progress has been made out of a sample of top shows across 6 channels, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky One. It's effectively, 75% of post-production professionals, people who worked in sound on these shows are men, very few women, very few sort of disabled representation as well. And so I think her report is important, and unfortunately that was really interesting, but it hasn't gotten a great deal of coverage in the trades, which has made me think, okay, perhaps are we missing a beat here in terms of post-production, and should we be doing more to sort of bring post-production coverage into the mainstream? I feel like as a reporter, I'm personally as well guilty of this, but you're so focused on pre-production and production stories and we kind of leave more of the tech-oriented outlets to cover post-production. And I think we do so at our peril. So yes, I thought I would put her in the club because I think it is a conversation worth having.
Welcome addition. Also, I guess, post-production, it's a huge business for the UK as well. I mean, there's a huge amount of work that happens on US productions as well as UK ones.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of huge post-production houses here. There's been a lot of disruption as well, I believe. Again, I don't follow it as granularly as I perhaps should. You sort of look to certain outlets to follow it, but I think there is given that this research is 5 years apart, and the picture is still, with all of the apparent strides that were meant to happen in diversity, that it's still so stark in post. I think really sends a pretty chilling message. So certainly personally, I would like to do more to incorporate post sources in my reporting. And yeah, I think Emma's a great campaigner and should have a spotlight.
I mean, Mark, diversity sort of had its big moment, and now we sort of see not even the pendulum swinging the other way, but you see what comes out of America about trying to sort of delete any reference to it. It's easier to take your eye off the ball, isn't it, with this stuff?
It is, and I think in the UK, the general narrative seems to be from both the producers and the broadcasters that we are going to press on because ultimately in my view, the more opinions we have, the more voices we represent in the country that we live in, the healthier our country will be and the more cohesive it will be. And I was at an event only with the TV sector only this week where this exact issue was raised, and the absolute consensus was that diversity, more voices, economic diversity particularly, and diversity including underrepresented groups is how we make television compelling. And we'll come on to lots of illustrations of it in the course of this conversation.
And also you want to represent your viewers, don't you? And you want to make sure that they see themselves.
Exactly. That is the country we live in. So let's hear everyone's voices.
Well, speaking of economics, the BBC released their annual report this week. The headline was a drop of £150 million in content spend in the coming year. But Manori, they're keen to kind of push back on the narrative that the streamers are in the ascendance, aren't they?
They are, no, definitely. The kind of reading through the report, they're talking about iPlayer and how and viewing across iPlayer and channels and how it still outpaces Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus. There's definitely
combined, I think.
Right, yes. And they certainly reference Gavin and Stacey and Wallace and Gromit and the success of that, those two shows over Christmas, a number of times. I mean, they are pushing back, but I have to say, I think the timing of this report, off the back of, as we've already discussed in this podcast, adolescence is a little eye-opening when you think about the ratings that adolescence had and sort of I believe groundbreaking ratings for Netflix in terms compared to linear transmissions as well. The timing isn't great, but also talking about established IP like Gavin and Stacey and Wallace and Gromit in comparison to really creative original like Adolescents, I think is not optically is not amazing. And I think I'm somebody who actually watches a lot of the BBC, and even I sometimes have to scratch my head thinking about sort of the last big sort of original scripted show that they had that really sort of resonated on a global level like this. And I struggle. I know they have some great shows coming out with like The Night Manager, I think will be big. But you'd love to see, you have to wonder, when Adolescents came out, it's like, oh man, that show, it was either Prime Video or Netflix, right? Why isn't the BBC top of mind for this? And all I can think of is budgetary reasons, but isn't that a very sort of sad state of affairs for the pubcaster?
I mean, Mark, the BBC is always slightly stuck in this position as we approach license fee renewal. They've got to talk up how great they are. They've got to also talk up about there's more competition, that they need more money. What did you think the annual report said about their current state?
Well, I always find with any conversation with the BBC, we have to somehow put it back into context. This is the license fee alone generates 4 billion, and it's declining, but it's declining by about 1%. Now, go into any other environment in the current economic world, and to have that sort of level of decline wouldn't register in many sectors. So 4 billion from a license fee, a £6 billion budget, and they're spending 150 million less. Well, it's not ideal they're spending less, but it's 150 million out of a total content spend of 2.5 billion.
Do you look at that drop and just think, oh, that's more kind of competition for money for us and for our companies? Do you think, hey, it's great that they're there still commissioning large amounts of content? What do you and your colleagues see when they see
well, this? I mean, I think a little bit of decline, but to put it in context, this is for a year where there will not be a major sporting event, and they would easily spend that kind of money on a major sporting event. So I think the context of this needs to be slightly nuanced. From our perspective, we run independent production companies, and they're our biggest client. They're the biggest spender in the UK, and of course we want them to be in fit health. It's critical. And with a budget of 2.5 billion to spend, they're half of the entire spend on original commissioning in the whole country. So they're massively important. And I would echo the absolute focus when they are trying to compete on a new global landscape must be to champion original UK IP. We need the BBC front and centre in exporting the UK creative sector. That is our soft power. This is what the government should be getting behind and saying we need the BBC to be absolutely commissioning the best possible dramas and the best possible unscripted shows that we then take around the world. And that is the UK creative industry at its absolute best.
Manori, you were saying there that iPlayer streaming is bigger than Netflix, Prime Video and Disney combined. They also say it's bigger than YouTube and TikTok combined as well. We've seen ITV and Channel 4 kind of do more YouTube sort of commissioning. They're putting more shows on there as well. Other ways to view. You don't have to go to their own devices or services like Channel 4 ITVX. Is this something the BBC have missed a trick on, not exploiting more third-party platforms?
I think that they have, to be honest. However, I think it's all really pretty complicated by the license fee situation, isn't it? It's sort of like if you're paying, well, what will it be, £175 a year, and you expect to see something on the iPlayer and it's sort of available for free or whatever it is on YouTube. I think that does sort of complicate the picture a little bit for the BBC. I do think that obviously young audiences, when you think about YouTube and its prominence, I was looking at the annual plan and sort of some of the stats around 16 to 34s, which is effectively, I think they've missed their target by a few percentage points. But also when you see the and I think this is actually more from the annual report, but there's an amazing stat about sort of 16 to 34s not really seeing themselves reflected in terms of a rating out of 10 of the BBC represents me or reflects me. I think it's 5 out of 10. Which is quite poor, because that is, when you think about the future of the license fee and the charter renewal and everything, are they doing enough to sort of cater to this audience? And obviously I think YouTube is a big part of that. I think the content is part of that, BBC Three and sort of all the disruption in terms of that brand, and the distribution of some of this more youth skewing content is a big part of that. So I think they have been a little bit. I'm a little more understanding about the YouTube sort of part of this because of the license fee, but it is going to become quite glaring given how quickly some of the the other broadcasters are pushing into this. I mean, at last, even that I feel as though it is somewhat delayed, but at least it's happened. Sort of better late than never.
Channel 4 for me have actually been excellent at this for a significantly less funded PSB. Public service broadcaster, when you see the work they've done on social and the work they're doing on YouTube, given their size, I think, and they come in for, as all our PSBs do, for quite a lot of criticism. I think they've done a brilliant job. And to be fair, there would be an error I'd say to the BBC, come on, you've got to try and push this through, because that has to be a concern, right? That they. I mean, this is often a channel 4.0 that they're doing on YouTube, creating new content for the platform. Even with the really heartland PSB stuff like news, they're prolific on social. And I think the BBC's caught between a rock and a hard place a bit, because everything is about the iPlayer, understandably so, because they're seeing the competitors as the Netflixes, the Disneys and the Apples. So they've got to make the iPlayer the destination. But if you don't bump into a piece of content from the BBC anyway, as a consumer, particularly as a young consumer, you're never going to go to the iPlayer. Yeah. They've got to find a piece of content that makes you want to go there in the first place. And from there on, your journey will continue. But it's very, very difficult for them to find those pieces of content that resonate with the teenage audience. I mean, the BBC would also say that kind of attribution's an issue, like their content is on Netflix, it's on some third-party platforms, but trying to get particularly younger audiences, but probably all audiences, to understand where it's come from can be quite tough. Yeah, and that is fair. I mean, they are one of the most famous brands in the world, so they don't just stick it at the end. So I have less sympathy for them on the attribution side. They get a lot of attribution equally the other way around for things that others, create, like Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. The amount of people who've told me they think that's a great BBC show, and it literally was an ITV. I think it works both ways. Manori, when you look at the 16 to 34 end of things, there's very little progress. They haven't hit their targets. They're probably unlikely to continue to hit their targets. Difficult for all broadcasters to try and engage with this audience. Is it fixable? Are we beyond a point where the BBC can be universal?
It's a really good question, and part of me wonders how much of this is a BBC problem and how much of this is a public broadcaster issue. I'd be very interested to look at other parts of Europe. And I know that this is something that, was at Series Mania last week. And I think this issue is certainly discussed by a lot of other channels as well, publicly funded. But is it too late? I mean, I think it all just comes down to sort of content and distribution, right? And I had a great chat with the showrunner last week who sort of specializes in YA and was very interested in their thoughts about BBC YA content, for example. And it's sort of like, well, what is it really? You know, like where is it? Where do you find it? And so I think the commissioning pipeline needs to be there, but also then marry that with the distribution issue that you have now. And I think if you kind of can square those two things, they've got a chance of winning, pulling that audience back. But when I think about, okay, what's a really good sort of youth skewing show in terms of with global resonance, I really struggle to think of those shows. And it could just be because there's so much else that I am watching on the BBC, everything from, Sherwood or Happy Valley to Gardener's World, which I love. And so maybe there is so much that you get for that license fee and whatnot. But I'm not sure them sort of pointing to shows like Gavin and Stacey and Wallace and Gromit are really, is the best sort of tack to take with this.
Well, speaking of content ideas, questions have been raised about the ideation of a Channel 4 programme presented by Michael Sheen. The Guardian's Tara Conlon wrote this week that Michael Sheen's secret £1 million giveaway was similar in format to a 2021 project called Bank Job. Mark, people have similar ideas all the time. I think this has been complicated by the fact that Bank Job had been in contact with Sheen's team before. It's a tough position for production companies sometimes about where these ideas came from.
It totally is. And this story is as old as TV is and will continue to be the same. So it's also got that added complication where the individuals involved put personal funding in. So of course it has a grittiness to this. But for me, we operate in the highly developed market where ideas per se do not differentiate. Differentiation will come from the actors, the presenters, the scripts, the sets, as much as the idea itself. So I know there's ideas we've developed that we've been in conversations with and we could point to emails with that a very, very similar thing has turned up somewhere else. Equally, probably the other way around. I would pick something like Race Across the World, right? It's a show I've only fairly recently got into and it's been going forever. That show was originally pitched as a show called Flightless. And it was a simple concept. You go from A to B without getting on a plane. It's flightless. The clue is in the title, or was in the title. But there was no time challenge. There was no pairing of families and friends. There were no budget constraints. All those things came through the process of creative iteration. Now, could someone say, I've had a great idea that you have to go from A to B without getting on a plane or without getting on a train? You have to hitchhike. We can all come up with those ideas over that with a few glasses and we'd all be millionaires. It's the iterative process between the production company and the channel that turn it into a hit, like Race Across the World, for example.
Manori, is it all in the execution? Do you think there'd be any comeback for Sheen and the production company?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the Bank Job team seem to think that the specific location of their format and also that £1 million target is something that was very unique to their idea. And I think the complication is really because they had those conversations with Michael Sheen and then now, and I believe it sort of this show sort of, or this documentary premiered at Hot Docs, right? And then a month later it was pitched to Channel 4 and definitely some really curious coincidences or alignment in terms of timing. I agree with Mark. I think sometimes these ideas do come up, but there are some markers in this that are a little strange, I have to say.
Just on the Channel 4 show, they've refuted the claims, and the spokesperson for Sheen told The Guardian that the inspiration for him doing something like this came from watching John Oliver buy medical bill debt in the US in 2016. We'll see if that's enough to fend off the lawyers. Okay, just before the break, Disney Plus have shared some internal insights on the 4 distinct audio types in the streaming landscape. Manori, can you remember what they were?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've got them written down here because I certainly couldn't off the top of my head tell you what they're so highfalutin. So they are the social shapers, the reflective explorers, the empathetic escapists, and the comfort connectors, which I think are sort of like, I think it might be like ad speak or like, Hollywood speak for just women and 16 to 30.
Which one are you?
which one am I? I think I'm somewhere between a comfort connector and a reflective explorer. But I'm a little bit of everything. I kind of like a lot of these genres, so I don't know. I think it's all a little, it's very advertising, isn't it?
Mark, did you see the list? Which did you?
I did.
Like you were drawn to any of them?
I did come up with a mashup of all of them, but I did read it and thought to myself, yeah, okay, psychographics is critical in trying to target our consumers when we're thinking of television production. It's much less about age now and demographics. It's about behaviors and attitudes. So this reflects that. What I loved about the survey or the report was that it wasn't just about Disney. It was actually about all streaming channels, and it was massive. There was 15,000 respondents across France and Germany and Italy and the UK and the rest of it. So this is a big piece of work, and I could identify with it. I think that social shaper space where you find a piece of content that utterly connects with the generation whose currency is, have you seen this? And we're all getting a bit like that. It used to be much more of a demographic cohort, but it's actually now, there's nothing like a bit of social currency. And again, I don't want to go back to the same television show, but most of us have come across adolescence through someone saying, have you watched it? And I found myself needing to watch it straight away. That weekend, it dropped because I'm like, I have to know about this. This is going to form the national conversation. And that is a social shaper influence coming into my life.
I think there's definitely something there's so much television out there, some joy when you find someone who watches a thing that you really like as well, that's maybe a little bit of a secret. I've been watching Paradise, which has been on Disney Plus, and not like a super breakout hit, but people who have seen it love it.
Yeah.
And so finding those connections, I think, can be really powerful. Another stat Disney said was that 65% of respondents get together with friends and family in person or virtually to stream big events.
I love this.
Did you think that we sort of forget about this sort of, I guess, Strictly type moments that bring the family together or friends together around a TV screen?
Just thinking about something like Traitors, isn't it? My friend Scott Bryan actually had who I know who has been on the show a few times as well. It was brilliant. He hosted a quiz pub night, basically, around the Traitors finale, which I thought was great and was really well attended. I think BBC actually even covered it. I think it's possible with certain sort of forms of big reality TV shows, isn't it? And it's really lovely to see. Even the virtual part of it is quite interesting. I think Facebook or Meta tried to do that with watch parties, didn't they? For a while, which I have to say I never really took part in. And I think they've kind of phased that out. But I suppose people still do it. Maybe just joining Instagram or posting something on Instagram while they're watching something, or Instagram Live. Maybe that's part of it too.
I think it's the power of TV. When I read this, I thought this is so ironic that the old days were about sitting down as a group with mates or with a family at a point in time, and we all thought that was over. We're all sitting down and saying, who wants to watch, when Slow Horses is going to drop the next, number of episodes, and having that conversation. The only difference is when we do it. We now do it on our terms. But television is still bringing people together and still starting that national conversation. It goes, tell you what, shall we all gather around Bob's tonight or so forth and watch the next big episode of Ted Lasso or whatever it happens to be. I think it's fantastic for TV.
Okay, when we return, we'll be talking about getting your business investor ready. I'll see you in a sec.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about how best to use your podcast network. Your show might be made by the same production company as other big hitters. It might fall under a broader umbrella or be in an ad network. These connections can be your biggest strength when it comes to cross-promo and making your money go further. For advice on cross-promotion or anything else to do with podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
Welcome back. Here's what we've been talking about in the Media Club this week. The Sun is over the worst of its phone hacking costs. This comes as Newsgroup reports its financials for last year. Press Gazette reports that revenue is down across the titles, but the Times made a profit of £60 million. Radio 4 is to become the new home of 90-minute audio fiction, The Stage reports. There was outcry from writers last month when Radio 3 said the Saturday play was to end. The new slot will focus on new dramas as well as existing works. And Bauer has completed its acquisition of Clear Channel Europe North, which gives them a billboard business to rival that of Global, who bought 3 outdoor companies in 2019. Links to all of those stories and more are available on our Substack. It's free to join, so just head over to themediaclub.com, and you get a lovely email every week with all the links and info about the show. That's themediaclub.com. Mark and Manori are still with me. Mark, when you hear those commercial radio stories, do you hark back to your commercial radio days, or are you pleased to have fled that world?
Never pleased to flee it. It's a great sector, but it's a sector that's completely changed through the last 20 years with consolidation and technology, which actually I think is a read across to what television production and independent television production is facing in the next decade, actually.
So let's talk about telly. So Zinc Media Group, that's your gaff. What's it sell? What have you invested in? How's it all going?
It's a television production group. And content creating group. So anything that sits on a screen and requires a camera, we'll film it and we'll tell stories about life and put them on a screen. So we're mostly television. About 65% of our business is television. The rest of it's for brands and TV commercials and businesses. And we're publicly listed. So we're the only UK-based television production company left on the stock exchange. Many have gone private. And we're actually doing well. We got our annual results out at the end of the month, so people will find out then.
Obviously, kind of competition for kind of production companies sort of ebb and flow. ITV and ITV Studios have a number of companies sort of in their world. You see people like Redbird coming into the market. What's that like for production companies when they see this interest?
Well, the sector, the biggest player was All3 Media. They were in a bidding war with ITV and with Redbird IMI, the Middle East company run by Jeff Zucker, and Red IMO beat off the competitor of ITV. What that tells us, I think, as a sector is this is an investable sector. People want to bring money to this sector, and that has got to be a good thing. There are hundreds of production companies, and when they own the IP, intellectual property, when they find a hit show, when you create something yourselves, you can sell that around the world. So television is an investable sector for private equity or for capital markets, because fundamentally, you consider these investors look at the whole spectrum, and we get quite myopic in TV. We think about just our sector. But if you're an investor, you're looking at it going, where do I place my money? Am I going to pharma? Am I going to tech, healthcare? Am I going to put it into defense or minerals? There's plenty of places you can place your spend. So what television needs to get back to doing is actually being a champion of the sector as a good place to invest and to grow. Because what are we doing? We're ultimately driving consumer behavior. We've just talked about how we all watch different bits of TV in part one. Why are we choosing our platforms now? Why are we going to Apple? I'm going to Apple because I want to watch Ted Lasso. Why am I going to Paramount? Because I want to watch Yellowstone. Why am I going to ITV? Probably my daughter's going there to watch Love Island. Why am I going to Prime? I'm going to Clarkson's Farm. I'm choosing my platform not for the platform anymore. I'm not saying what's on X platform or what's on BBC ITV. I'm going there to say I want to watch. That's telling me that the production sector is absolutely critical. And it's highly investable because we change national conversations and drive consumer behaviour.
Obviously, there's always lots of press, particularly at the moment, about challenges that TV faces, changes in economics, changes in how the streamers are working with independent production companies. Sometimes they can be quite a drumbeat of bad news. Are we wrong to not focus on that? Or should we be banging the drum for the successes, that growth you've just been talking about?
Personally, I think we've talked ourselves down for the last few years as a sector, when actually there's been some, look at the TV shows we're making. Just look at the results that are coming through from a business side for lots of these big groups. And actually the theme is the same. It's revenue down a bit, profits up a bit. That's genuinely the theme. And these are the most difficult days we've had for decades. The downside of our sector, when you compare it to others, is it is a low margin sector. Even the biggest players, the ITV Studios, the BBCs and so forth, are doing, 10, maybe 12% EBITDA margins. Whereas, those other sectors are doing 20, 25. So we're always going to struggle if we simply talk about it in those terms. But the converse is, as we saw with the latest takeover, the buyout of All3 Media, when a media group, a television production group, trades and is sold or bought on the open market, the multiples can be really good. They can be 10 times, 15 times, even as high as 18 times their profit margin. So any investor looking at our sector might go, okay, a minute, do I want to be there because it's a place of high social currency? Do I want to be in something that everybody's talking about? And to be fair, not a lot of people talk about mineral stock investment. So you can have television as part of your portfolio. Can it be scaled? And ultimately, even if it's a low margin business, is somebody in time going to come and pay me something decent for it? And the answer is yes. And we've just seen it in the last 12 months.
I mean, is there something in just it's sexy? It's a fun thing to be involved in.
100%. I mean, it's the soft power effect, isn't it? It's a bit like sport, actually. Everybody has a view. You can ask anyone in your social sector. Everyone has a view on what they thought of last night's TV. But it's got to be more than that. And I think the sector does need to kind of ask itself, why have we talked ourselves down quite so aggressively over the last few years? There was not a time, only 18 months ago, where one of our PSBs was almost reporting every day who was leaving. And honestly, this happens in other sectors all the time. It's okay. Things evolve. People move. Let's talk about the success stories. First and foremost, the products that are shaping our conversation and selling the UK creative sector overseas. And as a business, we've just seen one of the largest independent production group be bought out in the last 12 months for another investor who wants to scale it even more. And they're talking about putting ITV Studios and All 3 Media together. The two biggest would come together. That's the sign of success.
I mean, it's interesting. There's lots of talk about whether ITV was basically split in two, the studios business in one end and the kind of broadcast assets the other way. I mean, the studios was the big reason to grow a load of value for ITV. So interesting that it might end up split. Do you think that'll happen?
I think it will happen. And the reason I think it actually probably should happen is because at the moment, ITV, like Zinc, is publicly listed. It's on the FTSE. So the problem that the capital market has, which is the public market, is that it's massively undervaluing media stocks. ITV is undervalued, STV is undervalued, Zinc's undervalued. We're all trading at a 5, 6, 7 times our EBITDA profit, not the 10 to 15 that these stocks have traded in. Now, that is a challenge for ITV because, in effect, what the market is saying is we don't value your channel anymore. The linear,
yes, you can look at the numbers and say basically the ITV market cap is what studios are worth.
100%, exactly. And I think that's a clever technique that Caroline and the team have done there, is by saying, look, you're valuing my studios business, which of course the correlation is you're placing no value on that linear channel, which is ridiculous because clearly it has massive value. So I suspect they do have to spin out, and as they do, I would, from my seat, we're at the smaller end of the market. If there is a course correction in the biggest player being valued, that will only help all the way through the sector.
If you're an independent production company and you've had some success and you're thinking about growth and those opportunities, what should you be doing to get your business ready to be in a good place to maybe benefit from some of this investment?
Well, you need to be clear on your USP, and realistically, it's got to be about IP creation. Or in financial terms, we talk about revenue quality, which is really about how sticky, how returning is your business as a TV maker. What investors don't like about telly is it's lumpy and bumpy, and you can have massive years and terrible years. And that spooks investors. But it is the nature of TV. So get the right investors who are prepared to see a 3, 5, 10-year journey and not worry too much about 6 months, 12 months, or even 24 months. That's critical. Develop your IP, and also just please get finances in sensible order. Be able to have a decent pipeline, decent development slate. And then I think the third thing I'd say is be realistic about price. The heady days of 10 times, 15 times are not with us at the moment, as we've just said. The amount of companies I've spoken to said, well, we're going to wait until we have a really good year. And I'm like, dude, it's going to make no difference if you have a really good year, because we're all looking at the overall performance in the round. And if you have a bad year and a good year, actually, it doesn't make your business any greater or less valuable, particularly if it's just a one-off year. It's fine. Though don't try and game it. If you want to get investment, because ultimately there's things you can't do because you're subscale, then go and get your company ready and join one of the larger groups. And I personally believe that television has to consolidate. You mentioned earlier about the Bauer story and the consolidation in commercial radio. There is undeniable financial evidence that commercial radio is in the best health and in audience terms. Now, it smashes the BBC. In my day in commercial radio, it was a head-to-head. The commercial radio is miles ahead of the BBC now in terms of share of voice in this country. And it's had huge consolidation. So could we take a read across and say, okay, UK TV production sector, we need to go out and dominate the world again in our IP creation and in our storytelling. How do we do that? We need to invest more. We need to attract new money to our sector. And we need to go out there with the biggest and best ideas. I think one of the things we need to do to fix our shop, to get our house in order, is to take a bit of a leaf out of what's happened in other sectors and bring some of that scale to the party.
Manori, when you go and interview independent production companies and bosses, are they creatively led? Are they business led? Is there an equal combination of the two?
It's interesting. I feel as though I used to sort of interact with a lot more businesses that were a bit more creatively led, but certainly in the last few years, it seems as though more very business focused leadership has come in for, certainly at a few places, and people are a lot more pragmatic in terms of the kinds of developments that they're funding and that they're really putting through. I think it's becoming, and actually it's interesting when you think about sort of even markets like Series Mania last week in France, which used to be a very creative event. It was sort of a lot of inside baseball from creatives, and now it's become it's a great event still, but it's very corporate, and it's a lot of the business people who are speaking on behalf of these companies and talking about sort of the bottom line and sort of the business decisions that they need to make to kind of sort of keep these companies afloat. And I really noticed that this time. It's just become a lot more judicious in terms of decision making, and perhaps that's understandable. I think it's always you need that balance, right? It's everything in moderation, I suppose.
100%. It's not an either or.
It's not.
It all starts with, as we said, what programs are we making and how are audiences consuming these programs. But the way we get more investment, my big, the drum I'm trying to beat for our sector is that we need to talk about us in the context of all these other sectors, because an investor can choose where they put their money. Television has to get confident again, talk more confidently. We've got an incredible story, amazing programs, and it's a really good business. Doesn't sometimes sound like it though.
Okay, don't go anywhere. When we return, just enough time for the media quiz. I'll see you then. Welcome back. Just enough time for the media quiz. Let's see how much attention our guests have been paying to the media news. This week, it's entitled The Media Transfer Window. A few big transfers this week to take you through. Sky Sports style, you have to tell me the person or people at the heart of the story. So person or people. It's a best of three. Buzz in with your name if you know the answer. So Manori, you will say...
Manori.
And Mark, you will say...
Mark.
Let's play Media Transfer Window. Right, question number one. Who's transferring from the Times to the Observer?
Manori.
Manori, who is it?
It is Rachel Sylvester, who is becoming the new political editor for the Observer.
Yes, she is. Some news actually about the sort of the takeover. Around half current Observer staff have taken redundancy rather than join Tortoise Media. I imagine it's going to be quite a shift in culture for the new owners, do you think?
I suspect so, yeah. There's been a lot of, this past year has been a real media circus, I think, just sort of seeing what's happened at GMG and Scott Trust and the sort of Tortoise takeover. I think April 20th, isn't it? Easter Sunday is the last day of the Observer as it stands, and then it will be over to Tortoise ownership. So, yeah, it'll be fascinating to sort of see what that is and what that product becomes, but it certainly sounds like it's a civil war internally. In some respects, so. I
mean, Mark, when I read this, obviously a lot of turmoil. I mean, at least for Tortoise, they've got a bit more of a clean slate to start that process, and it looks like a lot of the staff have been looked after in the redundancy. Is it a good place for Tortoise to be?
Well, I think time will tell. They need to do something, and they again. The good thing is that they have attracted investment, and they've got investment from Guardian Media Group too, who are remaining a shareholder. So in that sense, has this change brought about a chance to completely reboot that opportunity? And yes, there's £25 million in new money going in. It's a huge amount of churn though, isn't it? It's enormous, if the stats are to be believed. And that's not surprising when you consider the new management's background, what they're interested in, where they want to take it. I'm a big believer in these sorts of changes, albeit this is a tectonic shift. They kind of had to do this. This was a title that was in very serious managed decline.
I agree. I mean, to be honest, there are so many journalists coming out of jobs now, and to sort of see a place that is hiring, and of course, it's interesting to see the various redundancy rounds, and I can imagine it must be very difficult for some of those longstanding journalists who have decided to take voluntary redundancy for various reasons, but certainly for a new generation of journalists coming in, perhaps we should view this as an opportunity of them to really help in creating something very special, new, potentially another sort of left-leaning outlet that, we don't have very many of in this country, which could be, an interesting editorial opportunity there as well. So I know that there are a lot of concerns around it, and perhaps some of them are understandable, but I do sort of look upon it with a lot of interest. I mean, Tortoise has had some very good investigative work, and if they're able to, I think spiritually, I can see a lot of synergy there with the Observer and what that product is. I read it every Sunday, and so yeah, I'm excited by it. But the internal issues have been interesting to read about, certainly.
Okay, question number 2: which team is leaving a big podcast company to form their own agency?
The team that used to run something else. Oh, Mark,
yes.
I think it's the team that used to run something else. Is that right? Have I got that wrong?
Yeah, so something else creative. They're the people behind the Waitrose show Dish, are leaving to form Cold Glass Productions. I don't know enough about this. There isn't lots of information. I mean, it seems like a sort of a wholesale departure from SE Creative. Again, more change, Mark.
Yeah, and something else. When I read this, something else are an audio production company, an independent audio company, and they were bought by Sony not long ago. And now I fear if everybody has moved, Sony may be scratching its head a bit, going, "Why has this not quite played out the way we thought it was going to be?" I don't know. I haven't seen the results.
Yeah, you sort of got a few different sort of splits. This is where it's hard to kind of keep track. There's now a sort of Steve Ackerman went to New York, and the sort of the podcast bit is very vibrant. They're doing a lot of things. SE Creative was more the kind of branded content end of things that sort of stayed in the UK. But yeah, clearly the team want to do something else.
And the fact that they're doing, I mean, they're very, very successful at making very niche brand funded content. And the world is, every single brand, every product is becoming a broadcaster, right? And I think they're doing the right thing by seeing themselves as a specialist in that space.
Okay, question number 3. Who has transferred out of Mirror owner Reach?
Manori.
Manori.
I believe this is Jim Mullen, who has left, has stepped down as CEO.
Yes, that's right. Profits, I think, increased at Reach under Mullen, but with the rise of AI, some more challenges for them. And I don't think he was maybe the most popular chief executive with the Reach staff. Manori, would I be right to be saying that?
So I think, wasn't this the sort of, so they own the Express, the Mirror, OK, and didn't the journalists have sort of insane targets, sort of clickbaity targets that they needed to sort of hit, which, having worked in sort of similar environments where, it's very, very bad for morale. It's a difficult thing. It's sort of the killer of journalism, and can certainly understand how that would not put you in very good stead with journalists. So perhaps this is a new chapter, right, with Piers North coming in for Reach. Although the way media is going, you have to wonder how much will actually change. But maybe that's me being cynical.
Well, yes, we'll have to see. I mean, they're definitely a company that's concentrated very much on the ad market rather than subscriptions, which kind of other publishers have gone for. It'll be interesting to see whether the new management continues in that vein. And will there be less pop-ups on the Mirror sites? Probably not. Anyway, that makes our winner Manori. Congratulations. As part of your prize, you get to set me some page view targets next time for the...
Can I have photos of your puppy as well? Because that's really what I'm here for. Okay.
Yes,
all right.
Yeah, you can do that too. A special prize for that as well. Anybody can see it. Of course, I have a new puppy, so there's an Instagram account, Black Labrador Archie, if you want to sign up to that. Thank you to both of you for joining me. Mark, what's coming up for you guys and your production companies next? What's hot on the agenda?
Well, it's the BBC Saturday Night Quiz that is going into production shortly over the spring and early summer. That was announced. It's in the public domain. The BBC have commissioned a new Saturday Night Quiz show. And the good thing is, I think this is another good story for television. It's coming from Glasgow. It's been given to a production company that hasn't got a track record in quizzes, so they're being brave, brought people in who are specialists. it's got to be seen as BBC doing what it should do, pushing the boundaries, moving money outside of London, championing new talent. So we are obsessing about making sure that this quiz with Amanda Holden is a success when it eventually airs, which of course is down to the BBC.
Well, we look forward to seeing it on our screens. And Manori, how can people keep up with your work? What have you got coming up?
What have I got coming up? I'm not sure if I'm actually really, but I'm speaking with a very exciting production company that is doing some great work, some of which we might have actually already spoken about on this episode. But that will be my next story for The Ankler. I have some interesting features in the works as well for broadcast, which I spoke with Mark for, actually a really great feature last August. A few things.
Lovely. Great to have you both on the show, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us as well. Remember, you can go to themediaclub.com and sign up for our free Substack. We'll send you an email each week with links to all of our stories. I was your host, Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill, with support from Ollie Peart. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. I'll see you next time.